Woledge and I'm the director here at the Royal Crown Derby Museum Charitable Trust. So we're based in Derby on the site of the factory that makes Royal Crown Derby. If you're not sure what that is, essentially it's expensive porcelain. We make all kinds of different things, from little paperweights that people collect to plates and dinner services for fancy restaurants and people who like to collect our items. Well, it was a chance encounter really, but without telling you a long backstory about that, I chanced to get to know a chap called Richard, who was giving a conference paper at a completely unrelated conference. And I said to him, I'm just about to take up this position at the Royal Crown Derby Museum. And he said, oh, Royal Crown Derby, goodness me, did you know, my family have a Romani background and they love collecting Royal Crown Derby. And I said, I didn't know that at all, but it sowed that seed of fascination for me, because until then I'd just seen Royal Crown Derby as something that wealthy people bought, I didn't understand or realise before I took the job here that there was that depth and interest to the types of people who collected Royal Crown Derby. So after I'd been in post a little while, I got back in touch with Richard and I said, let's do a project together to find out more about the significance of Royal Crown Derby within the Gypsy, Romani and Traveller communities. And so we got our heads together and we cooked up this idea for this project, and we put in some funding together from the Arts Council, and we were lucky enough to get it. So that was the first steps really on that project journey. Well, I was quite conscious of that in both a positive and a negative way. So in a positive way, one of the things that I wanted to do was put the stories that we collected from the Gypsy, Romani and Traveller respondents as on an equal footing with the stories of, say, royal commissions and the appearances that Royal Crown Derby items have made on television shows, because that's an equally important part of our social history. So in that sense, I wanted to level some of those power structures. But of course, I was also conscious that the Romani community is a very private community, and going in there as an outsider and saying, hey, just tell me all your life stories, could actually be quite off-putting to a lot of people. So I was very conscious of working in partnership with Richard to help build bridges. We also worked, I was very grateful for the support of Rural Media and their Travellers Times production, because again, that helped us find participants through a route which was trusted within that community. And I thought that that was really important. And also I was really clear that submissions, if we did edit submissions, then anybody that submitted anything would see the edited version. So we weren't just going to take their stories, make them ours and run off with them. We were going to work together to put their stories in the public domain in a positive light. Richard on the language that we used, but it obviously became apparent to me during the course of the project that although we used Gypsy, Romani, Traveller as a sort of catch-all for several groups of nomadic peoples, there are many subsets and other sets that might see themselves within or on the periphery of that umbrella. And some of the stories that we included were from some of those other groups. And I felt that that was important. So whatever nomenclature you use, you're always going to be careful that you're drawing a line somewhere, aren't you? Someone's going to be just on the boundary or just one or other side of that collective. So I was conscious of that. I was very conscious to talk with Richard first of all, so that I didn't accidentally say anything which would be exclusionary or off-putting or rude, frankly. Because after all, I wanted people to share their life stories. That's something you don't do unless you trust the person who's asking. And actually, I was very touched that people did share some very personal and very lovely stories. The other thing that I was conscious of when I was editing it was that I didn't want to change the language of the submissions into a more institutional, curatorial language. So I did very, very minimal editing on any of the submissions that we got. Some of them were written submissions, some were video, and some were audio. And I was very conscious that I occasionally corrected an obvious spelling error, something like that. And I occasionally added a tiny bit of punctuation, like a comma, just to make the meaning clear. But I didn't do things, for instance, like correct our brand name, which is technically Royal Crown Derby, but often referred to as Crown Derby within the communities who collect it. So, you know, there were quite a lot of conscious decisions that went into me thinking about how much do I change, how much do I edit, and how much do I keep. And it was the same with video submissions. You know, so for instance, I didn't edit out a beginning of one where the lady said, oh, this is making me quite nervous, I'm not sure I'm going to do that very well. I did ask her if she wanted that edited out, but I think it was nicer to keep that humanity within it, so that I think it actually built empathy with the audience, because most people feel a bit self-conscious with a camera pointed at them. So I tried to let people's voices be their own throughout the project. Doing the project, Richard said to me something which I think was quite interesting, that he said because of the sort of nomadic nature of many of those communities, they were early adopters of digital technology because it was an easy way to keep in touch. But actually, throughout the course of the project, several participants said, well, I want to participate, but I don't know how to make a video recording of myself, or I don't know how to set up the camera, I don't know how to create an audio file. And so actually we broadened what we were asking people. So to sometimes, if people were unsure about it, I offered to record a conversation like you and I are recording our conversation. Sometimes I offered to interview them on the phone, and I recorded that to get audio clips. And sometimes we accepted written submissions, which initially we weren't going to do, but it seemed such a shame to lose a submission just because somebody wasn't digitally confident. So there's sort of a bit of, you know, in theory, there was good reason why it might have been easy to make digital submissions. In practice, it was a barrier for some people. Be yourself, because I was quite self-conscious of coming in as an outsider with no real knowledge of that community, and empathy, but nothing beyond that. You know, first of all, I was quite self-conscious about how I presented myself in that arena. But actually, you know, after a while, I thought, actually, you know, people are people, you know, and if you're nice and you're warm and you meet people halfway, that's pretty much a good first step. And I really got to know some of the people who contributed, and, you know, we continued our conversations, and, you know, so I actually felt that it was that sort of one-to-one nature of it in some way was really valuable and really nice. And after a while, I stopped thinking, oh, what if I say the wrong thing, you know, and started thinking, you know, it's okay. So I say, you know, meet people halfway, you know, be comfortable with who you are, and often that it lets people be comfortable with who they are.